I hate people that complain or criticize what's going on and don't make suggestions about how to make things better. And you don't make that mistake. You talk about what needs to happen and how we can make changes that need to be made in this world. So I love that about this book.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I like everyone else, have moments of overwhelm, but in the end, I hope we can move towards action.
I do too. I want to talk about some things that I think we get stuck on. You talk about what it means to say that our history has been whitewashed.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of conversation about this, and still is a lot of conversation about this. I live half the time in Texas and some of the time in California. So I've read a lot in two very different environments
Mhm.
about that. But talk about what you mean when you use that term.
And I use the term sparingly, to be honest, because I know it's a term that people struggle with. What I mean when I use it, what it refers to is that um, psychologically, we're all drawn to narratives that support our perspective. There's a classic study in the field of psychology that took a football game that got very heated. Players were thrown out of the game. There were, some mixed emotions about different calls that were made, some unsportsmanlike conduct. And when the psychologist went and talked to the fans of both teams, this was a Princeton Dartmouth football game, if I remember right, in the study, the fans on each side were absolutely clear that it was the other side that was unsportsmanlike and that it was their team that was the victim in this situation. And that's, I think, a situation anybody who's ever watched a sporting event can relate to, the idea that, you sort of see your team in a rosier light than you see the other team.
Right.
Whitewashing of history is in some ways nothing more than that natural impulse that we present things from our own perspective. And in the United States, we have a racial history that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, where the perspectives of people who have been enslaved, or people who've been had their land removed from them, are going to be different than the perspective of people who didn't have that. And so whitewashed history is referring to, is the historical perspective that we've all learned as we've grown up, that we've sort of absorbed from the culture, is it representing multiple perspectives on what happened?
Is confirmation bias locking us in place where we're just not open? And if so, why is that?
Yeah, so I mean, I know that, like, when I propose a restaurant that, my husband and I should try, and he says, let's look at the reviews, and then I go look at the reviews, and I do tend to pay attention to the 5-star reviews, since this was the restaurant I proposed. That's confirmation bias at work, and I sort of conveniently don't notice the lower star reviews. So confirmation bias is always at work for all of us in every domain of our life, where our eyes will gravitate, our minds will gravitate to whatever reinforces our point of view. What I've been noticing in myself and in our society is that I think we are trying to unlearn some things. So we talk a lot about being lifelong learners, but I think there's also some lifelong unlearning that's starting to take place, and that pushes against our confirmation bias. Our confirmation bias is going to say, let me reinforce everything I've always believed to be true and fully true. Um, Unlearning says, let me see if I can let go of some of that and add some new information and relearn.
Right now, clearly, we're a divided country along so many different topics. And I always think, look, we're all Americans. There are so many things that we can bond over. I teach negotiation skills sometimes, and I always tell people that if you're going to negotiate with somebody, the first thing you should do is sit down and say, okay, first, let's talk about what we agree on.
Mm,
Because sometimes when you spend time to say, what do we really agree on? What do we really both want? the list of things that you need to negotiate is a lot shorter than maybe what you thought it was.
Yeah.
I really think people have forgotten the fact that, at least in theory, I thought we all loved this country, that we
Yeah.
all wanted America to be a wonderful place to live and raise our families and all of that. Not that we don't have differences, because certainly we do, but it seems like the differences have controlled the narrative instead of some of the common things. And a lot of it has to do with race, of course, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with race. Is there a place to start this narrative where it doesn't have to be contentious and we don't have to have such vitriol over the things that we do disagree about?
Yeah, what a great summary of where we are. I think there is. I've been describing this situation some of us feel in where we love our country so deeply and then feel like that love of country means it's hard for us to see and engage with what we don't like about our country. I mean, we can love our children and not like everything they do. But sometimes, as I call it the patriot's dilemma, this love of country is getting in the way of us actually engaging with what we don't like about our country. I think the path out of the patriot's dilemma, as you said, I love my country, you love your country. So many of us share that, is what I call being a gritty patriot. And this builds off of the wonderful research of psychologist Angela Duckworth on grit, where grit is passion and perseverance in pursuit of a meaningful long-term goal. And here I'm thinking about our love of country is what we're pursuing as our meaningful long-term goal, is keeping this country as vibrant as it can be for our children and grandchildren, but doing it in a way that is active, like you said at the beginning of our conversation. And instead of feeling we're entitled to love of country, to easy love of country, to realizing that sometimes our country breaks our heart. Sometimes our children break our heart. We can still love them. We can still support them and help them do better. And I think being a gritty patriot is something we could all get behind.
I love this country, but I don't think it's perfect. I don't put it on a pedestal. It's just like in relationships. I would hate for anyone in a relationship to ever put their significant other on a pedestal, because you're doomed to failure when you do that, because they're not perfect.
Right.
You're setting them up to fail. It's going to come tumbling down. I don't think you're being disloyal as an American to say, I love this country, but boy, there are a lot of things about it that I want to make better, that I want to see improve. And when you talk about being a gritty patriot, to me, that seems to be a path forward. It's saying, love your country, but have a to-do list.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Love your country, but have a to-do list. That's great. It's a little bit like letting go of the Instagrammed version of our country, that sort of airbrushed view of it.